Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says an elite club. The article here is speaking about G7 and the concerns that are associated with this particular grouping. What is this G7? This is a group of informal countries where seven countries, United States, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and United Kingdom come together as an informal grouping to discuss the economic, international, and security issues that are haunting the global community. So kindly remember, this can be important from your preliminary examination. So which are the countries involved could be a prospective question for the preliminary examination. When all these countries come together, they contribute to about 40% of the global GDP and 10% of the world's population. When you look into other organizations like NATO, what they have is a legal existence. What they have is the member designations. What they also have is permanent secretariat to ensure that its activities are conducted on an annual basis. But when it comes to this particular grouping, it does not have a permanent secretariat. It does not have a required structure of its own, which means to say the legal existence, the permanent secretariat, as well as the official members and the designation is not present under this particular grouping. How did this organization originate? Back in 1975, this organization originated. Initially, this grouping did not have Canada, but after a year, that is in 1976, and after that, what we have is Canada coming into this particular grouping of G7. Why did it come into existence in the year 1975? In the 1970s, what we were facing is the oil crisis. This oil crisis resulted in recession. So, in order to overcome the recession and to bring a common understanding to the economic affairs, this particular organization was formed. So why was it formed? Initially, when it was formed, it came across because it wanted to bring all the global countries which were back then controlling the majority of the economy, which had the highest GDP, come together so that they could discuss all the economic repercussions because of the oil crisis. But eventually, with time, it is not only discussing the economic issues, it is also focusing on international issues, it is also focusing on security related issues, it is also focusing on environmental climate change related issues. So as of now, what was formed as an economic understanding issue has now been opened up to multiple other issues as well. How does the meeting take place? The presidency of G7 meetings is held by each of the seven countries in turn. As of now, the presidency is under the control of United Kingdom. So it is the one which is organizing the meetings, conducting the meetings, hosting the meetings. At the end of the meetings, they issue a particular document called as the communique. What is this communique? This is one of the official documents where all these seven countries come together, they enter into a consensus and they broadly give what exactly was the point of discussion for the global community to understand. So when it comes to the agenda, they speak about international economic policy, foreign policy, security policy, and they also have common responses to health, human rights, climate change, developmental counterterrorism, so on and so forth. In this particular year, that is in 2021, the presidency is taken by United Kingdom. And where is it being held? It is being held in England, which is why it is called as Cornwall Summit. So kindly remember, Cornwall Summit is in reference to G7. It can be important for the preliminary examination. So the G7 summit was held at a resort in Cornwall in the southwest of England. After the meeting was held, the communique was released and it has given two broad perspectives. What are these two broad perspectives? One, it states that United States of America is back with the G7 meeting. How? When you go back to the previous edition of the G7, what we had is multiple issues with respect to G7. Why? Because we had the ascent of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump did not believe in multilateralism. He wanted to move away from G7 and he believed that America is superior. America first policy has to picture in, and he did not respect the views of the global G7 countries. As a result, what you had was America not discussing multiple things with all these countries. As a result, what we have in this particular meeting is that America has said that it is wanting to take part in the challenges of the global community, which is why the G7 countries have come together and have promised the global community that they'll be providing about 1 billion coronavirus vaccines to the poor countries. Back then, with the ascent of the Trump administration, it was inward looking, and now United States of America along with other countries have promised that they would be providing coronavirus vaccines free to other countries. This particular communique also established that the global community wants to establish an open society. What do we mean by this open society? This is a society which is flexible in nature, where individuals, citizens of that particular country, have the freedom of belief, they have wide dissemination power of information as well, they can have humanitarian approach to multiple issues in the society, they believe in the equality, political freedom, and democracy happens to be the very important aspect of the open society. So according to communique, it recommends that the global community should believe in the principle of open society, which is why Australia, India, South Africa, and South Korea were part of this G7 meeting. The second message given by the G7 countries was in reference to countering China. Why countering China? As we have discussed, this particular communique has given a particular message that it espouses the very fundamentals of open society. But China is an authoritarian regime. It does not believe in representing the views of the minorities, which is why it is suppressing the views of the minorities in Xinjiang. And an aspect of open society is democracy. It is suppressing the democratic rights when it comes to Hong Kong. So what this particular G7 countries have come together is countering China when it comes to minority rights in Xinjiang and democratic rights in Hong Kong. China also has non-market policies as well, where it is the central government which controls every minute details of its economy, which can hinder the growth and prospects of other countries due to the manipulation of the central government. Apart from this, China constantly interferes with the operations in the Indo-Pacific region. It does not let other countries enjoy the fruitful resources of the South China Sea. Why? Because China wakes up in the morning, it looks at the historical lines of the nine dashed lines and claims that the entire South China Sea is China's, but unfortunately it is not able to settle to the nuances of the new age global and international order. As a result, there has been this warning issued by G7 which says that China has to constantly stay away from any issues that is embroiling it in the South China issue. Added to this, it is also believed that it was because of China that the world is witnessing the gift of COVID-19. So the origins of COVID-19 virus has to be supported by China, says the G7. So the two clear messages given in the communique is that they support the open society, and at the same time they are also countering China on multiple fronts as we have just discussed. But the article here also focuses on some of the challenges and concerns associated with this particular grouping. What are these concerns? This organization is a closed group. What do we mean by it? It is exclusive in nature. There are only richest few countries which are so-called richest earlier. They have formed this particular grouping and they blatantly exercise all their power on the other nations. As a result, virtually every single summit that has been taking place since 2000 has been met with protests, demonstrations in the country wherever this particular meeting has been held. Why? Because it is only few countries which issue orders and issue manifestations as to how the global community should react. It excludes multiple other countries. As a result, it has become a closed group. That is the first major issue with respect to this particular grouping. The second major challenge is that there is no binding impact on the policy. They plan to implement a particular program or a scheme, or in some situations, they may plan to bring a change when it comes to the global community as well. But when it comes to the actual execution, this may not work efficiently. In the past as well, they wanted to bring reforms when it comes to climate change as well. But you have country like United States of America under Trump administration, which withdrew from the Paris Climate Conference, which means that they enter into a consensus in their meetings, but when it comes to the actual reality, it may not work, says the author. this particular grouping meets for a limited amount of time. In the limited amount of time where they do not have a permanent secretariat, they do not have a designated officials of their own, in the limited allotment of time that is given to this particular meeting, how will they bring major reforms? Let's say they are speaking about climate change, or plastic waste contaminating the oceans, or how to promote the women entrepreneurship in the developing world, or the various issues that have been emanating from the global scenarios. All this requires multiple countries to gel up and discuss. Ideal platform will be United Nations, or it can also be developing countries included, that is G20 grouping. But why is this grouping, which has very limited amount of time, discussing on all these global scenarios, is the third major concern. Followed by this, there is exclusion of the world's largest economy. When you look into the original backing, it had countries like Italy, it had countries like Canada. These were initially the richest countries. Now what we have is the largest economies, let's say for example China, or for example India, which are not part of this particular grouping, which means the viewpoints of the developing world is not taken into picture, but they are giving some of the viewpoints and expressions which may have impact to the developing world. One such example is what is called as the Plaza Accord. This particular accord was signed in the year 1985. What exactly happened? Countries decided that they have to manipulate the exchange rate. How? By depreciating the US dollar in relative to Japanese yen and German's Deutschmark. So during this particular period, when they depreciated the US dollar, its impact was felt on number of developing countries. If their manipulations, if their policies are going to bring trouble to the global community, to the developing economies, why not bring them together and discuss is the major challenge. So the article here goes on to say that this particular grouping has various challenges and concerns, and it is not ideal, move past its time, anachronistic in nature, and as a result, is it the right grouping to discuss about the developing economy is what needs to be introspected. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says unlocking war histories with a purpose. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has recently approved a new policy. This is about archiving, declassification, and publication of war operation histories. The responsibility of such a declassification of record is specified under Public Record Act of 1993 and the Public Record Rules of 1997. What is this archiving? What is this declassification? What are its advantages? What are the policy guidelines? Has been explained on 13th of June 2021 under the fourth topic, new declassification of policy gets known, at 34 minutes 51 seconds. Kindly look into it. But what would be our discussion today? Our discussion would be primarily focused on the concerns associated with such declassification. What should be done by the government of India going forward? What are the major challenges when it comes to its execution? Whenever there has been an event or an operation conducted by the Indian Army, or an issue between one country to another, there are two things that come into picture. One is the political decision making, the other is the field operations that have been taken place by the armed forces. The armed forces include the army, it includes the navy as well as the air force. So what would happen? Political permission would be given by the political masters, and there will be few operations that will be taken by the armed forces. So who are the people involved? One is the political party and the political masters. Then there are field agents, that is the armed forces as well. So whenever a history is to be written, so whenever there is declassification of a file that comes into picture, there are two viewpoints to that particular history. That is the narrative that has to include the political side, the narrative that has to include the armed forces side. But under this particular article, the author goes on to say that when it comes to Henderson Brooks report, the Indian Army would not declassify or it is not going to declassify this particular information, that is primarily because this Henderson Brooks report has given a critical analysis of both the political perspective as well as the armed forces perspective. As of now, we have seen only the scathing remark when it comes to the armed forces, the lack of leadership under the armed forces when it comes to the China war. With respect to the political accountability is opaque. So the article here says that it is not only about critically analyzing the role of the field agents and its operations, but what has been the conversations of the political pundits. Their conversation should also be viewed when it comes to reading the history. That is where the author brings into picture the example of Vietnam War. Vietnam War had access not only to operational accounts but also to archive discussions between the political architects. So whenever there is an history that is being written, the history being declassified, which is coming into the public forum, this should not only include the perspective, the viewpoints of the field operations, but what led to this particular decisions, what was the conversation surrounding the political executive will also have to be made in the public forum, says the author. So the first major challenge is that whenever there is declassification, it has to take the viewpoint of the political masters and their decision making and not only consider the field operations is the first challenge. The second challenge is with respect to the multiple levels understanding. What do we mean by it? Whenever a decision is taken with respect to the war or with respect to historical decision making of one of the events, it is not only one agency which is taking the decision. It will have the headquarters, it will also have the command unit, it will also have the field information as well. So multiple levels agencies come into picture. So when such declassification is happening, all the viewpoints and perspectives of multiple levels will have to take into picture. Followed by this, we require the researchers and the historians to work together. It is not only historians who read it from the books. It is not only about those people who have been the practitioners. What we require is both these people coming together. That is historians who are researchers and at the same time the field operatives. Let's say for example, the military personnel who have been on field, they would know what exactly is happening. So it is not only accommodative of historians, but it should also take the viewpoints of field operations such that this will ultimately be digitized. So as of now, we have number of documents which are not digitized. So whenever there is declassification that is taking place, when information is pushed from one form into another, what we require is the digitization process. So this digitization process is a humongous task. So what we require is one such operation, a software company, so that this particular digitization process happens on a fruitful basis. So the article here further goes on to speak about two important operations. One happens to be Operation Brastak, the other is Operation Falcon. What is this Operation Brastak? This happens on the western sector in reference to the state of Rajasthan. So this was a period where India wanted to showcase the strength of its conventional army. So what does it do? It asks the army to pull in thousands of troops on the western border along with armored columns, artillery and rocket systems. That is to showcase its overwhelming show of military to Pakistan. Such an airland exercise that was conducted in three phases over several months in Rajasthan to showcase the military might of India is what is called as Operation Brastak. As part of assignment, you guys will have to put it on the comment section. What is this Operation Falcon? So this is what we have to understand in reference to this article. But for the rest of the other analysis, kindly look into 13 June 2021, fourth topic. Now let's look into the next article. This article is speaking about India and China skirmish that happened along the line of actual control. There are about two articles, a year on unanswered questions on the Galwan clash, the road from Galwan a year later. Let's gel both these articles together and take it as one single issue. There was a cold calculated military maneuver that was conducted on June 15, 2020. Ladakh's Galwan Valley witnessed some of the violent clashes between the armies of India and China. This particular clash resulted in about 20 Indian soldiers being martyred and the peace that was existence between India and China broke after 45 years between India and China. Ultimately, what we have is border skirmish between India and China along the line of actual control. So the article here speaks about multiple issues because of the Galvan incident, and at the same time it also recommends what needs to be followed going forward. The first major question is in reference to the political accountability. What are we discussing here? When it comes to the political party in power, whichever is a political party, they have to answer the questions posed by the opposition. They have to answer to the people of the country. But when questions were raised about China, what we see is that the Galvan Valley incident remains opaque and there was no official statement issued by the Ministry of Defense. In fact, when questions were asked by the opposition to the government of the day, there were multiple questions which were evaded. In fact, some of the questions were left unanswered by the government of the day. Now, if you look into the military situation along the line of actual control in the present situation, it is not that precarious when it comes to the border areas. But in case there is a two-front war, how are we going to fight China and Pakistan simultaneously? As of now, number of soldiers who are currently present along the line of control along the international borders of India and Pakistan have been moved along the line of actual control, which means in case of an eventuality both surfacing from China and Pakistan, how is that we are going to maintain and sustain and fight the two front war is another question asked by the author. The third is in reference to the economic might. Whenever you speak about India and China, what is the comparison? It is not only about the military prowess, but it is also about economic advancement as well. When it comes to China, it is more than 13 trillion worth economy, and when it comes to India, it is just about 2 trillion to 4 trillion economy. It is not even cost 4 trillion. So what do we have is a huge comparison when it comes to the economic might of China. And when it comes to the COVID-19, we also promised that vaccines would be given to multiple countries in and around the world, and we also promised that we would be standing by the world when it comes to the COVID-19. But because of the second wave, we were not able to stand up and export the vaccine. But at the same time, it is China which is able to export its vaccines. So China has the economic might. It also has the One Belt One Road initiative. It is able to give more money to the countries world over. In fact, multiple neighboring countries have also drifted towards China as well. It can be Nepal, it can be Sri Lanka, it can also be countries like Bangladesh as well. So what it means is China has deeper pockets, economic might, and it may swing other countries towards the policies of China. What is the way forward? What should India do? India should appoint an independent panel which will review the lapses because of this particular incident, and in case of such surprises in the near future, India should have a backup plan of its own. Further, India can build multiple coalitions as well. This can be with countries like United States of America, UK and France, and at the same time it can also engage in multi-country forum like the Quad so that it can bring an end to the hegemony of China. So this is not only about political strategic ties, it is also on the economic front, it is also on the people to people front, and also long institutional linkages as well. Only when we are able to have this personal connect with the people, that is when countries irrespective of the political parties will support India, says this article. So the Galvan is a reminder that India cannot forget its northeastern borders. India cannot forget what has happened with respect to China, and for this India will have to ensure that it multiplies on its economic performance. So only when we have the economic might, we would be able to bring about a change when it comes to the military might, and ultimately we would be able to answer China on its own terms, says this article. So the choices will have to be made by India to have a significant geopolitical impact in the near future, says this article. It is this that we have to understand. in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says a policy difficult to defend. The article here is speaking about vaccine policy. The government of India recently reversed its policy when it comes to vaccine administration. Earlier, the government of India had said that 18 to 44 years of age, the vaccine will be provided by the state government. This has now been changed and the central government has confirmed that it will be providing the vaccination free to this particular population of 18 to 44 years. Added to this, the policy has also confirmed that about 25% of the vaccine will also be given to the private sector for administration to the people. This is where the author says that this policy of the government of India to give 25% to the private sector may not serve the purpose of administering vaccine, says the author. Why does the author say so? That is because analysis of actual administration of vaccines till May 30th shows that private sectors account for barely 7.5% of total doses administered. So out of the entire dosage given to the entire population, only 7.5% was given by the private sector up until May 30th. In almost 80% of the district, the public sector has provided 95% of the vaccine doses, which means who is able to provide more vaccines? It is the public sector. Who is not able to provide the vaccines? It is the private sector. In spite of the private sector having access to it, it is not able to administer vaccines to a larger section of the people. In fact, even if it is administered vaccines, it is only in the urban areas where it is able to meet the standards, but in the rural areas, since the presence of the private centers are not present, what it is creating is an urban rural divide. So the article here goes on to say that this is a manifestation of inequality, creating a divide between the urban areas as well as the rural areas. One of the major policy of the COVID-19 is herd immunity. How does herd immunity develop? One, because the person develops natural antibodies, or this has to be given artificially by a vaccine. If more people are not given the vaccine, it means it takes a longer time for the people to get the herd immunity. And what we are also developing of late is called as the variants. If we delay the process of the vaccines, it also means what we will have more variants, we will not be able to provide universal vaccination. Ultimately, more the variant, more will be the delay. So what is the author saying here? Instead of giving it to the private sector, the government sector should take it up and ultimately herd immunity can be realized, says the author. Added to this, if we consider the private sector, about 25% is given to them. People do not have access to the money. People do not have the jobs. If they have to pay for the vaccine, they'll not get themselves vaccinated. And the point is, it is the people who is going to suffer. This is not a disease which can be cured on its own, but it can be passed from one person to another. So what we require is universal immunization. So this has to be paid by the government and not by the private sector. If people have to go to the private center, it means they have to pay, and it also means out of pocket expenditure will also expand with this particular initiative. So the author here is requesting the government of India to take the responsibility of inoculating the mass population and ultimately bring an end to the menace of COVID-19, not give too much of responsibility to the private sector, as the presence of private sector is more in the urban areas, less in the rural areas, and ultimately if we are not able to inoculate, provide more vaccines to the people in the rural areas, it means that COVID will continue to exist. The variants will bring surprise to the people of India, and ultimately we cannot bring an end, says the author. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. G7, an exclusive club comprising the world's advanced economies, slowly eclipsed by emerging markets, is an outdated grouping. Do you agree? Justify. Galvin is a reminder that India cannot let its guard down on its northern borders. Analyze. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Give positive feedback to your friends' answers. And if you liked our initiative, please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.